deal with increased complexity of frameworks, domains, devices, data types, large data, and all of that needs to be done on increasingly complex infrastructure, virtualized cloud, platform as a service, or bare metal. So you need to deal with all of that complexity while you have to deliver your apps faster. So it's clear there is a need for a new type of platform, a new type of platform for cloud. The industry calls it platform as a service, or PaaS. It needs to be simple to let developers focus on their code. It needs to be open. So you have to avoid, you don't need to be locked in. You don't want to be locked in to a specific cloud framework or service. And it needs to be flexible and scalable. So you can deploy and scale your application very quickly by focusing on your code and not wiring middleware. Cloud Foundry is the industry first open platform as a service. When we say open, we mean choice. First and foremost, choice of clouds for deployments. You'll see that you can deploy Cloud Foundry in many different instances from VMware, from the open source community, on your own laptop, or build it yourself. You'll see that you have a choice of industry standard frameworks. So in the demo, we'll see Spring, we'll see Node.js, and a few application services like MySQL, Redis, and Postgres. But there are more supported in Cloud Foundry, and we will review those. You have your choice of infrastructure services that are not limited to a single stack. We'll talk about that as well. And most importantly, the architecture is extensible, so you can digest future cloud innovations. You can increase your ability to support more and more frameworks as they're coming in. And last, it's available as open source, so you can truly avoid locking. And we had many community announcements today, this week, and in the previous weeks around additional frameworks coming into Cloud Foundry. What I ask you to do in the next 30 minutes when we go over this is think of your next or your recent web application. Think of what development or deployment framework you will need to use or you want to use. Then think about the deployment complexity, especially when you're thinking of how you're going to scale your app. Think about the work you need to do in order to scale it, the work you need to do in order to deploy it, using those modern frameworks. When we do the demo, follow along and think, how can I use my app in this environment? Specifically, I hope you will see how simple it is to build and scale an application on Cloud Foundry and move it between cloud. In the case of the demo, we will move it between your laptop on Micro Cloud Foundry and cloudfoundry.com, the instance of Cloud Foundry run by VMware, without any code changes. So build locally, scale to the cloud without changing your app. And finally, as you've seen in the introduction slide, go and sign up. If you sign up today, you'll get a free account and instantly approved with the promo code that you'll see in the end. So sign up, try your app, give us feedback. You may ask yourself, why do we need another PaaS? There is a lot of PaaS out there, PaaS solutions. The reality is that PaaS solutions in the marketplace are not complete. They introduce significant inhibitors to mainstream and enterprise adoption. Specifically, you can't move between clouds. So when you choose your PaaS, you choose your cloud. In Cloud Foundry, we believe choosing your PaaS should be decoupled from choosing your cloud, and you should actually run on any cloud. Your laptop, choice of public clouds, and build it yourself using open source bits. You don't want to be limited to a single provider. You have to have an on-premise solution so you can deploy your PaaS behind a firewall. You don't want to be limited to a single framework, so you want to have a choice of frameworks. You want to, for example, you want to do Ruby, Java, Scala. Now you can do .NET in the Cloud Foundry open source. You have a choice. You don't want to change the way you build application. In other words, the same developer experience as if you're running in your own laptop or building an application that has nothing to do with cloud should remain the same when you're moving to cloud. And last, the way to deliver software in the cloud era, we believe, is via open source. So a PaaS solution has to be open sourced. And depending on your geography, you can relate to the incomplete PaaS joke here that we have. So let's dive a little deeper. What do we mean when we're saying developing and operating application is challenging? If you look at traditional app, and me personally, I spent many years of my career in engineering and R&D dealing with middleware and trying to make sense of that complex picture here. When you have many app servers, many load balancers, you have messaging system, you have a bunch of database, you need to do caching solutions, you want to do some offline work using workers, and so on and so on. And then you need to deploy it, you need to manage it, and you need to scale it, and you need to do it on a bunch of different infrastructure. So you have multiple nodes, you need to connect between all of these nodes. You have deployment challenges. How do you describe this model of deployment? How do you build VMs and network? How do you connect all of that when you're moving from an offline environment to an online environment? And very, very important, how do you successfully update this? If you have, specifically when you're in the development, testing, and staging process, you have multiple updates. You want to do rollback of bad changes. You want to do this quickly to increase your productivity. Remember that complex picture from before? I hope you'll see in the demo that with Cloud Foundry, this becomes very simple using a few API calls or a few verbs. Self-service, simple. We are connecting and wiring all the middleware components for you. So we let you focus on your app. We take care of the plumbing, if you will. Services are provided as a service, which means you just bind to them. You don't provision them. So if you want a MySQL, you just say, I want a MySQL instance, bind to it. So you can do that on any cloud. Just push your app. We take care of the plumbing, bind the service, and you can scale it also with one command. And when you're doing the scaling, we take care of the load balancer and the DNS configuration, so you don't need to worry about telling the DNS now there are more, telling the load balancer now there are more instances available and route between them. So what's under the cover? What Cloud Foundry has in cloudfoundry.com and in the Cloud Foundry open source community. First, choice of framework. In cloudfoundry.com, Spring, Java, and Grails, Scala on Lift, Ruby on Rails and Sinatra, and Node.js. In addition, since we launched this back in April, we had a lot of open source contributions, basically people from the open source community writing frameworks and adding them to Cloud Foundry. The Erlang framework here was actually added less than a week after we launched, so it's pretty easy to add new frameworks to Cloud Foundry. Today you have, through the open source community, ability to run Python apps on Cloud Foundry, PHP apps on Cloud Foundry, Erlang, and now recently 2 vendors announced .NET capabilities on Cloud Foundry, the open source project. Application services. You can run vFabric Postgres, the commercial version of the Postgres database, MySQL database, vFabric, RabbitMQ for messaging, Redis for caching, MongoDB for big data. In the demo, we'll see the use of Postgres, MySQL, and Redis. Clouds. Last but certainly not least, probably the most important thing about Cloud Foundry is the ability to move between cloud. Micro clouds, which basically means running Cloud Foundry on your laptop for development environment, public cloud or private cloud that's coming soon. So in the case of Micro Cloud, you have Micro Cloud Foundry, which is also available as a downloadable VM. We'll see that in the demo. You have cloudfoundry.com, which is VMware's operated service running as a public cloud, and a choice of partners and distributors running Cloud Foundry. And all of that is open source in GitHub. If you go to cloudfoundry.org, you can get all the source code of everything under the Apache 2 license. So multi-cloud, or choice of vendors for distributor and providers, is not just a buzzword. This is a reality in Cloud Foundry. So we see we have a choice of private cloud distributors, many vendors, choice of public cloud providers, and choice of cloud infrastructure. So with that short introduction, what I'd like to do is walk you through a demo. And also, this demo will also serve as a way for you to ramp up on Cloud Foundry and get started. Because we believe slides can only take you so far. We want you to see some real stuff and try it yourself. So from that point, everything is live. Things can happen. It's part of the fun. So from now, we are live on cloudfoundry.com and Micro Cloud. We're going to show two apps. The first one is a Java Spring app, an online bookstore. We're going to first deploy it on a Micro Cloud and then scale it to Cloud Foundry without changing our code. And we're also going to change, and we're even going to change the database that we use. Then we're going to have some fun with a Node.js chat app. We're going to start by deploying it again on a Micro Cloud and then scale it to cloudfoundry.com. I'm going to share my desktop here. So hopefully you can all see the browser. This is the cloudfoundry.com website. This is where you start. Your first step, if you haven't done so, go ahead and sign up. It's free, and if you use the promo code CloudToday from the webinar, you will get instantly approved and you don't have to wait in line. After you sign up, accept the terms of service and sign up, you will get a password based on the email, a temporary password based on the email that you've provided. The next step is to go and install one of the Cloud Foundry plugins or tools. In the demo, we'll use the SpringSource IDE. And probably one of the things you want to do first is installing the Vmc Client. That is a Ruby command line client. That's all it takes to install it after you have Ruby installed on your machine. One of the first things you probably want to do is change your password. I'm quite happy with my password, so we'll move on. The next step, we said we want to use Micro Cloud. So once you have your account set up and you change your password and you have VMC installed or STS, the SpringSource Tool Suite IDE, you go and you download your Micro Cloud. Again, very simple. You log in with the same credentials and you're generating a domain. A domain is basically where your app is going to live on your microcloud. So in our case, we're going to use cfmicro as the domain, and our apps are going to live at cfmicro.cloudfoundry.me. You need to use a token to configure your microcloud. Once you have the token set up, you download the microcloud VM. If you're running on a Mac, you can use VMware Fusion to just fire up the VM and you have it running. If you're running on Windows, you can use other player or workstation to run your VM. In my case, I'm using Mac. So here is my microcloud running. That's what you see after you set it up. Setting it up takes 5 minutes, answering 2 to 3 questions, putting your token, and you're all set up. So you can see this is my identity, this is my URL, the cfmicro domain, and this is my user. So now we have our microcloud and we have our account all set up. So let's start running some apps. The first app, as I said, is a Spring app. So this is the SpringSource IDE based on Eclipse. If you're a Java developer or a Spring developer, most likely you are familiar with the SpringSource tool suite or the Eclipse plugin. And what I have here is a sample app called Books that is based on a Spring MVC template using Spring Brew. So for those of you who are familiar with Spring Brew, it's a pretty cool way to actually generate a complete app with UI and with forms and everything using a very simple scripting language. The bottom line is this is a standard Spring app. There is nothing special here to Cloud Foundry. No special language, no special configuration, no special connection, no magic behind the scene. This is your standard Spring app with Spring annotation and everything that you're familiar as a Java or Spring developer. So let's deploy it. Let's first deploy it on microcloud. Locally running, everything in my laptop here, in my Mac, everything is local. In order to deploy, first step, we're creating a proxy to our microcloud. We're selecting the Cloud Foundry plugin for STS, which is also available for Eclipse. We'll call it Micro. We'll select our cloud. The first time you do this, it will ask you what is your domain. So you see cfmicro, this is my domain here. I'm going to log in using my Cloud Foundry demo account. I'm going to validate that it works and finish. So basically now I have a proxy to my microcloud running here in Spring STS. And the only thing I need to do to deploy is drag and drop my app to here. I'm not changing a single line of code. I'm clicking next. We're going to call it Books. So it's going to run on books.cfmicro.cloudfoundry.me. You will not, if you're online, you will not be able to access it. It's all running on my microcloud here on my Mac for development. We're not going to start it yet. You will see in a minute why. So now we have this entry here, Books. And what is a bookstore without some place to store books, right? So we need a database. So for that, we're going to double click on the app and we're going to add a database. In this example, we're going to add a MySQL database and we're going to call it myTest or myDevDB. I'm going to select MySQL. And the only thing we need to do is drag it to the application services of that app. That operation, you will see it later under the VMC command line tool, is basically generating a bind. So it binds between the application and the database. So now the application is here, and we're going to start it. What is actually happening behind the scene is pretty cool. Cloud Foundry takes the manifest of Spring with all the tables that we specified, with all the fields that we specified we want for this app. It provisions you an instance of MySQL, and it even creates the tables for you. So you don't need to do anything aside from binding it to your app. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to a browser, go to the URL books.cfmicro.cloudfoundry.me. Here we have our, oops. Well, as I said, this is all live, so it's part of the fun. Let's go back here. Okay. Should see it running in a minute. And here it is. So we can add a new book, and it's all running on our local microcloud here. We can list our books, and you see we have a full-blown UI here that was generated my local book, me, and so on. So let's move on. So we have a book, we can list it, it's all running on local microcloud. Now the next step is obviously we're happy with our app, and we want to move it to a real environment, or we want to move it to a public cloud environment. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to STS, and we're going to create another entry. And this time it's going to be to cloudfoundry.com. So the difference is now I'm deploying into a public cloud environment. So you see I'm deploying to api.cloudfoundry.com, a public cloud environment. I'm going to use my same account. And this time I'm going to use a different database. So now we are running in production. Again, we are doing drag and drop books to the same entry, in the same way to a different entry. So we're basically dragging books into a public cloud environment. We're still going to call it books. We're not going to start it again. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to bind it to a different database. If we bind it, previously we bind it to MySQL. Now we'll call it MyProDB. And we're going to bind it to Postgres. So let's say we are now running in production. We want another type of database on a public cloud environment. We're dragging and dropping it, doing the bind, and now we're actually going to scale the app to 3 instances. So that's pretty cool. Not only that we use a different type of database, we also scaled it to 3 separate instances because we're running in production and we want more capacity and be more secure with our app. Now we're going to let it start it, and it's going to be run on a public environment. So this time, when we'll go to our browser, this is the previous URL, right? This was running only on my micro cloud. Now we're going to do the same thing on cloudfoundry.com. So if you are in front of a web browser, you can actually do the same and add books. So this is now all public book, and it can be you as the author. And it's running in 3 separate instances on a Postgres database in this big data center of cloudfoundry.com on a public cloud environment, much more capacity. And the key here, we didn't change our app one single line of code, but we move it from our local environment to our public environment. The next thing I want to show you very quickly is the command line tool. So this is the VMC command line tool. And what we have here is a simple Node.js app. So for those of you who don't like graphical IDEs and prefer command lines, we have a command line tool for Cloud Foundry. And this is based on the Node.js chat app from Ryan. And I did some very minor modification to it, and basically it's as is, and we're going to deploy it first to Micro Cloud. So the first thing is doing VMC target. This is the equivalent of creating a server in the IDE environment. we're going to hit the API endpoint. We're going to log in. So I'm just showing you how you do the same thing we did in the IDE from a command line. We're going to use our account. And VMC info command shows you what you have on your Micro Cloud. Here I have a VM with 1 gig of memory, and this is my services. Now if I'll do VMC apps, you can see that we have a books apps running here, the one that we did before. So it has name of the app, it's running, that's the URL that it's using, and these are the services. So what we're going to do on the Micro Cloud is deploy our small little Node app. We're going to do the VMC push. It's the equivalent of the drag and drop in the IDE. Yes, we'll deploy from the coin director. We'll call it my chat. And this is the URL it's going to run on. So you see the Cloud Foundry detects that this is a Node.js application. So again, same environment, different frameworks, different services. Yes, this is a Node.js application. We're fine with a 64 meg of memory. And we want to bind a service. So remember when we did the drag and drop of the services from in the second screen in the IDE, this is the equivalent on the command line. So yes, we want to provision a new service. This is the services that we have available on Micro Cloud. So we're going to choose Redis for caching, and we call it my chat cache. So now it's creating the service, and we can deploy. Oops, sorry, again. Let's do that again. And we'll do new chat. And we'll bind the service here. And hopefully it will run. Yes. No, we want to provision a new one. Let's choose Redis. Staging, starting, and we're done. Now if we go to our web browser, and I think I called it my new chat, .cfmicro, again running on my microcloud.cloudfoundry.me. We have this small little chat app here, and this is Node.js app, and it's only me because it's private. Soon will be public, don't worry. So very quickly, let's go back to our command line now, and we'll show you how we move that app into cloudfoundry.com. So moving between environments, VMC target, very quickly, we're going to do api.cloudfoundry.com. So now we are targeting the public cloud environment. We're going to do the same idea. We're going to do push my new chat. We're going to, oh, you're right, I need to log in first, sorry. Again, live demo, it's part of the fun, cloudfoundry@gmail.com, using our password. Let's deploy it. Yes, you can obviously skip all these questions. There's a bunch of taglines you can use. You can read the VMC help and our blog. Let's bind the service. Chat cache. And now you can actually participate in this chat. In previous webinars, we had some pretty creative people posting stuff on the chat, so you can try your luck. If we go to the browser and now open the public one, so my new chat.cloudfoundry.com. And I'm going to log in here. And maybe you guys are already, oh yeah, cool, very cool. Nice. So this is basically the demo part. So let's go back to the webinar and recap a little bit. So you've seen how easy it is to basically take an app, just push it to Cloud Foundry. Now you know what push means. Focus on the code. Don't do any middleware plumbing. We'll do it for you. Not only that we'll do it for you, you're able to scale it, move it between clouds, use different frameworks, and all without changing your code, binding different services. So that's pretty cool. We've seen Spring, Java, using Spring Brew, Postgres, MySQL, running locally on a micro cloud, moving to a public environment in cloudfoundry.com, scaling. Then we've seen Node.js app, using a different kind of service, different kind of tool, CLI, Redis, deploying locally, experimenting, happy that it works, then publishing to cloudfoundry.com. So key takeaways before we open the floor for Q&A. We've seen that applications have become more complex. We need faster time to market. There is a need for a new platform. That new platform that is called PaaS has to be open. You need to, it's important, you must avoid lock-in. You want to have your choice of clouds, choice of frameworks, choice of services, and you want this as an open source platform. Cloud Foundry is available in many delivery vehicle, cloudfoundry.com, public cloud offered by VMware, Micro Cloud Foundry running on your own laptop, cloudfoundry.org, or a choice of Cloud Foundry providers for many frameworks, several clouds, several services. But to do next, go and sign up, get your account, use the promo code CLOUDTODAY to be instantly approved. Read our blog, there is a lot of information. Read our documentation. It's very simple to understand, and the commands that I've not covered in VMC, like instances, how to view logs, very simple. It's all pretty straightforward. And most importantly, try your app and give us feedback. Hopefully by now you understand what you can do with Cloud Foundry. So now take your existing apps or a new web app that you're thinking in several frameworks and try it on Cloud Foundry.